Welcome to episode 18 of 10-Minute Record Reviews. This time we're going to talk about Jeff Beck's classic 1968 album, Truth. The Jeff Beck Group, I guess you could say. And what I've been listening to is a Canadian reissue. I think it's from the late 70s. It's one of those ones you can't actually find a date on Epic, but it sounds pretty good. What to expect from this? This is heavy blues. It's quite a diverse album. It's got it also has some traditional pieces in there. It's got some guitar virtuosity as you expect from a Jeff Beck record. It's the same recipe as Zeppelin's debut, but not the same effect. Even though there are two future Zeppelin members on here as session people. But for the most part, this is a transitional album between sort of jangly 60s pop towards the heavier rock and roll of the late 60s, early 70s. So the lineup here, the basic lineup is Rod Stewart on vocals, and this is Rod Stewart's introduction into the musical mainstream. Although he had been with a band called Steam Packet, they didn't do very much. This is Rod Stewart's first step into the mainstream. Obviously Jeff Beck on guitar. Then you have Mick Waller on drums, and Mick Waller would do a lot of drumming for Rod Stewart on his well-known solo albums that were to come out fairly shortly. And Ronnie Wood, who is a guitarist but also a bass player and who plays bass on this particular album. He does not play a lot of guitar, if any, I don't think. So what you have here, except for Jeff Beck, is if you swap out Jeff Beck and you bring in Martin Quittenton, you have and Pete Sears, you have a very similar lineup to Rod Stewart's solo albums here. But the cohesion of this record is I think nothing like what Stewart would achieve certainly in a year or two with many of the same players. So Beck had been kicked out of the Yardbirds whenever it was, 66, 67, for being temperamental, for being late, Beck is one of those guys that kind of creates, the stereotype of the prima donna. Without Jeff Beck, I don't know how you get Ritchie Blackmore or other sort of prima donna rock musicians. And after a little bit of messing around, sort of cutting a few singles on which he sang, with to sort of moderate effect. Here he's trying to pull together a more cohesive vision. Jeff Beck isn't a cohesive guy, and so it's not surprising that the cohesion doesn't necessarily work as well here. He brings in Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart, needless to say, great singer. In my view, had not found his voice on this album. He's got his, he's unmistakably Rod Stewart. He's got his unique tone, but he's really relying on that tone, and he hasn't really figured out how to play against and in the instruments and leave white space and so on. So there's an awful lot of drawn out, notes which are not particularly melodic, and frankly I find him a little bit awkward and sometimes a little bit overbearing at points here. Particularly when he deviates from the melody and starts to improvise, he just does not work. And Rod Stewart is a great balladeer, but he's not a blues singer, and he's trying to be a blues singer a lot of the time here, and that doesn't really work. By 1969-70, everything is to change for him, and he brings in more dynamics in his singing. It really clicks. It doesn't really work here. I think it's the fundamental issue with the album is that Rod is still kind of one of them, that he's feeling his way. So this album gets to number 15, which is okay, but it was soon eclipsed by Led Zeppelin 1, which came out 5 months later. And the big difference is in the production. The person who produced this is a guy called Mickey Most. It's produced to, a passable mid-1960s standard, but which means it doesn't have much bottom end. There's way too much reverb on this record to my taste, and that also doesn't do Rod Stewart any favors, as I always think he's a much better singer, or he sounds better when his voice is portrayed more intimately. Led Zeppelin's formula was much the same in terms of the composition of songs. It's produced better, it sounds better, it's just delivered better, it's performed better, and it shoots up the charts. And Beck is totally dismayed by this, particularly as You Shook Me is a song which occurs on this and also on the Zeppelin record. And anyway, by all accounts, Beck was pretty dismayed by this. His follow-up to this, Beck Ola didn't move many copies, and this group kind of fractures, like almost everything that Beck was doing at the time. It sort of fell apart. But like Jeff Beck, there's flashes of brilliance on here, including a couple of really great tunes and a couple where the talents of the players on here really shine. So it's very uneven. So the music kicks off with Shapes of Things, which of course is a reworking of a Yardbirds tune. I don't know why this was done. This was a reinterpretation and a rearrangement which just doesn't work. Stewart singing doesn't work here, I don't think, and it just seems unnecessary. You feel that there ought to have been so many other choices, and why open a forward-looking album with an instant reflection back to your past? It's a strange choice. Then Let Me Love You Baby. This is one of a number of blues songs in this album. Beck takes credit for writing it, which is kind of bizarre. Again, Stewart trying to be a blues singer, getting about a C+B on that score. Morning Dew, which was a cover of a contemporaneous hit in the 1960s. Lovely song, actually. Hampered the production. It sounds a bit like they're singing in a gymnasium, but the quality of the song, I think, comes through, and it's a nice change of pace for Stewart. He's not trying to be a blues singer here, and so his delivery is working. Then You Shook Me, back to the blues. Not the best cover of the song. Rod overdoes it. Beck's playing is really good here. I will say that for that. And then the final song of side one is Old Man River, which again, like the opening song, strikes me as an odd choice. It's a bit of a throwaway tune. I'm not sure what territory they're staking out here, but it seems kind of inconsistent unless the idea is we're going to play every piece of African American music of every variety. Funnily enough, Beck and Stewart took another song like this, kind of an African American sort of spiritual traditional song, "People Get Ready," 20 years later, and actually did a much better job of that one. There was an MTV video and all the rest of it than they do the thing here. Then there's side two opens with Beck doing a solo version of Greensleeves on acoustic guitar. I don't know why. I mean, that sort of thing worked a lot better on Stewart's solo albums than it did it does here. Then Rock My Plume Solo, which is an original, and I think one of the better songs here. Beck and Stewart are both in really good form. And then we're on to what I think is one of the two really good songs in this record. Beck's Bolero is a magnificent song. Now, weirdly, this was actually recorded 2 years earlier with a different lineup. So that strumming you hear, bum ba da dum ba da dum, that's actually Jimmy Page playing a 12-string acoustic guitar. And it's a whole bunch of other session people on that album. That was actually recorded while Beck was still with the Yardbirds. It's an amazing song, and Beck's playing, I think, is way ahead of 1966 on that particular version, or on that particular recording. But again, here it is, plucked from that period of time, put on this record. So it's not obviously reflective of the group that's playing here. Then we got a live, it's hard to know exactly how live it is, recording of a blues song called Blues Deluxe. It's a long, Freddie Forgettable, slow blues song. Again, confirming that Rod Stewart struggled when he needed to do improvisational blues. But then, high point at the end, Ain't Superstitious. This is a well-produced song, the band is tight, and Stewart is great here, particularly because I think he sticks to the melody. It's a blues song, but he really delivers, and Beck's playing is really muscular here. It's a really great song, and a great way to close out the album. So the verdict, it's a famous record, but I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. As I've been suggesting, I think the whole is way less than the sum of its parts. 2 great songs, a few other pretty good ones, a bunch of other filler and some awkward-sounding blues attempts. In no way, I think, is this an essential record. It's significant because it's a transitional piece between sort of Yardbirdsy, Kinks sort of rock and roll and real hard rock of the 1970s, and it's also significant for Rod Stewart's emergence. but that's as far as I'd go. But you know, give it a spin.